Thank you, Chair. It's just to say I asked some questions at the last meeting of the Director of Regeneration regarding Stonebridge Cross. Can I give my thanks to the Director of Regeneration, who has been in contact with one of his officers, and we're trying to progress with meetings to take that forward. So I just wanted to say that has been addressed, and my thanks to the Director.
Win my Pedant of the Year award, although I'm generally referred to in the minutes as Councillor Steve Munby. On the apologies for absence on Stephen, and it's just if I can be called Steve generally, I'm always happier.
Sorry, Chair, I'm having difficulty hearing you. Are we on Matters Arising? Okay. Is that any better? Yeah, that is better, yeah. I had a cold last week, not COVID. So I've got bunged up ears, and if I'm coughing, I do apologise. I've got a glass of water. I've got actually 3 matters arising, if that's all right. The first one was just to note in the Cabinet Member's report on page 14 that she noted the lack of accessible housing. So I'm looking forward this evening to see that point carried through to the reports we're going to receive later on. Also on page 8, the minutes report that the equalities section must be filled in reports, and NA meaning not applicable is not sufficient. And I'm disappointed to see that that is repeated this time, but I'll probably bring them up when the items come. And on page 31, there was an issue about employment of disabled people or disabled employees. This week is the disability employment gap. So as from Tuesday of this week, disabled workers are generally not being paid till the end of the year to to be on an average pay. So I was told that I would get some information. I'd asked for some information, and the Director to provide further information to members of the committee, and whether that will be provided today, I certainly hope so. So I think that's my 3 points. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I bring in the Director?
Yeah, good evening. Can I just apologise that hasn't been filled in again? I did check, and there was a view in there was a view inside the building that it didn't apply to this type of update. So I think I need to go back and check what applies and what doesn't. It wasn't intentionally disregarding what you said in the last meeting, because that was in my mind. So sorry we got it wrong again. We'll correct it.
Yeah, if you could check that. I think previously we have discussed that all reports should have equalities implications detailed on them.
Yeah.
I don't think that's just for this committee, that's across the council. Are there any other points from the minutes or any matters arising? No. Can we agree those minutes? Thank you. And now moving on to the Cabinet Member updates. So the Cabinet Member updates at pages 17 to 29. I'll pass over to Councillor Doyle, who can speak to her report, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you, Chair. So there's just a few things that I wanted to update on from my written report. So in the report there features 2 lengthy items on the energy efficient standards and the Green Homes Grant. And I just thought that considering the recent rises in energy costs, the reduction in benefits and focus on climate issues, that it is a priority of myself and the Mayor and the Cabinet that we are delivering good retrofit schemes and forward planning for long-term and wide-reaching solutions to energy poverty and emissions from our housing stock. I just wanted to let the committee know that I've received information on our healthy homes stats from 2017 to 2021, and I'm reviewing these alongside the social value report that captures the Green Homes Grant local authority delivery social value, and ensuring that these schemes have a clear and good goal of reducing carbon footprint, improving fuel efficiency and creating good quality jobs for local people. Since my written report, we're also exploring options of how we ensure local registered providers are making best use of the retrofit funding available to them. When the stats show us that 18.1% of households in Liverpool are in fuel poverty, which is 4.7% higher than in England, I think it's an extremely necessary piece of work. I also just wanted to update on a meeting that myself, Mark and Sam Campbell had, really positive, with Paul Kelly from Breaking Ground, the community-led housing hub for the Liverpool City region. We had a discussion that was looking at realistic and effective ways of supporting community-led housing in the city, and the meeting was really timely given the recent Cabinet report regarding community asset transfer and the process for community land trusts. And I also wanted to give another update on the COVID rent arrears item on my report. So since the written report, I have updates that our allocation is £334,926 in relation to the additional one-off funding that was given through the Homelessness Prevention Grant. Now, we are still understanding the terms and conditions of the grant that has been given from government, though we feel fairly confident that the grant will be targeted for private sector tenants. And I will be doing urgent work with officers to look at the process and the most effective way of administrating it. And I'm in conversation with the Deputy Mayor on how this funding can fill the gaps of support and support people who have rent arrears. And I'll also be making sure that there's a huge focus on messaging and advice for the voluntary sector, as we know that these will be the main people referring those people with rent arrears in. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Councillor Doyle? Councillor Robinson?
Just a few from myself, and first and foremost, thanks ever so much for such a comprehensive report, Sarah. Really, really kind of good to see the kind of the detail of all the work that you're doing for us. And there's a couple of questions I've got around sort of Article 4 and landlord licensing. In terms of the Article 4 update you've given on page 19, thanks for convening the meeting that you did with ward councillors like myself and other affected wards that suffer with the proliferation of HMOs, and that was really, really useful. In terms of the updates on planning applications and decisions, we did get those, but it hasn't happened again. So can you just chase that up in the system to make sure it is happening? But into more kind of the detail work, it's absolutely great to see the number of HMO refusals we're now doing as a city since the Article 4 has come in. But when you look at the kind of breakdown of the figures, and this isn't a criticism, don't misunderstand what I'm going to say here, the vast majority of those have been in Picton. Now, that's brilliant in Picton Ward. And would I be right in kind of saying that because of the new neighbourhood working that's being piloted in Picton, there's that much more granular approach of the housing stock that's given you that intelligence to be able to knock those back? Because my gut instinct would tell me from a Kensington perspective that actually there'll be a large number of properties under the radar because we've got nefarious developers and landlords who frankly don't bother about the planning process. So having that kind of deeper dive that we're doing in Picton would give us that opportunity in wards like my own and others to actually have that evidence to knock them back. I should also say that I think the figure's slightly out of date because there has been one HMO knocked back in Kensington in the past month, which is fantastic. So we're starting to go in that right direction. And I know in kind of in future reports that we've got on the agenda, we're going to be talking about how the Picton approach is going to be rolled out to other wards. So really keen to understand the timescales we're looking at that we can deal with on that. I think the other point I was just going to raise with regard to sort of landlord licensing is just a suggestion with regard to the way that, frankly, it seems that the government's messing us about on this. Is it worthwhile, kind of through yourself, asking the city's 5 MPs to request a meeting for you and them with the relevant minister? Because as members of parliament, ministers can't refuse that type of meeting to put that kind of pressure on, because it's an absolute joke, frankly, that we're being given the runaround. And I know from a ward councillor perspective that in the first couple of months after we lost landlord licensing, we still had a really effective database, so we knew who we could chase up. Now we're finding that kind of a lot of that information, understandably, is now completely out of date, and we don't have that kind of granular information to chase the landlord. And frankly, those nefarious landlords know we don't have the powers that we did have previously. So that's why I just suggest that kind of next stage of proactive action, because we desperately need the landlord licensing scheme back. And I know you understand that as well as anyone. So those are the points and kind of questions I wanted to raise. I
welcome those points, Liam, and I think you will know even probably more than me, because you're a councillor in an area where there are a lot of HMOs. The nature of private landlords is that they tend to move to an area where they don't think that focus is, and I know that's what Picton councillors were saying to me with Greenbank. It moved to Picton, and I know that this is probably the feeling of people in Kensington when there is such a focus on Picton. And I think you definitely do need those timescales so you can say to your community, this work is happening, but this is when it's going to be focused here. And I completely agree with the meeting with the minister, and I think going into that meeting it might be something where we talk to members about what you want us to say in that meeting, because I think members will have a lot of ammunition for us to bring into it. So thanks, Liam.
Thank you, Councillor Mumby.
First again, I thank the Cabinet Member for her report, which I thought was excellent. I've actually got two separate sets of questions, Chair, so it might be that they be dealt. The first lot relate to housing. I mean, I was very pleased to join you at the Florrie for the launch of the Community Land Trust. You don't need me to tell you the kind of need for more social housing in the city. I wonder if you could, if not now, but subsequently report on where we're at in terms of the capacity to deliver council housing in future. And secondly, whether you would be willing to report to each select committee on what progress we've made in delivering respectively affordable housing, social housing, community-led housing, because I think it's a question people ask. And, you know, I'm not expecting you to work miracles, the impossible will do, you know, but I think it's important to keep people informed about that.
Yeah, just for members of the committee to note, the next meeting in January of this committee will be focused specifically on housing. It will be a housing based committee. Sarah?
No, I completely agree, and I think it's one of those topics that everyone wants to know about in the city, because everyone will know someone that is either on property pool or needs better accommodation. And I think one of the things that I can talk about is we're in the very early days of setting something up with the major RPs that will be a strategic partnership board where we talk to the RPs about what we need them to do in the city and what they need of us. And I hope those formal discussions will make things a lot clearer in terms of what we need to do with property pool, what they need to do with the tenants, what they need to build their capacity and what we need from them. And in terms of the council housing, I had a meeting last week with Ian Byrne and an MP, and I'm due to have a meeting with Dan Cardam. And they have both asked me if we can have a very frank discussion about the housing issues in the city so that they can secure debates going forward in government so that they are able to voice the things that we need. Because I think, unfortunately, the situation with council housing, unless we see a return to the social grant that government can give councils, it's incredibly difficult to build council housing. And, you know, I'm an active member of the Labour campaign for council housing, and I think it's something where we need to make sure the finances stack up, and we need to make sure that if there was to open a HRA, we would be able to do it properly. And I think these are the discussions that need to bring in the local MPs, because it does come to government supporting us with it properly.
Thank you, Councillor Mumby.
I know, Councillor, that you share my concern both as a ward councillor but also in your cabinet member role at the decision of the planning committee yesterday to waive section 106 payments on a development in our ward. And you also will know this is not the first time that's happened, and this was an issue raised by both Cala and the commissioners as of major concern. So I want to ask you to consider a number of steps to address this problem. It's important, it's crucial that the council not only does the right thing, but be seen to do the right thing. So we need to demonstrate that we're doing that. I mean, the criteria for the decision, as I understand it, by the planning committee was essentially viability reports that were submitted to the planning committee. And the first two things I want to ask, which I think are fairly simple, is viability reports are available on the planning portal, but not accessible. So planning committee members get sent them with the planning committee agenda, but they're not publicly linked into that. It will be very simple to attach viability reports. The reason that's important, and I speak as a councillor, that they're pretty complex documents. You need time to look at them, and if you have to spend time chasing them up, that's time you don't have to spare. The second issue in relation to viability reports, and that issue, is to ask that if the planning committee, if the planning officer's recommendation is to reduce or accept a complete waiver of Section 106 payments, where councillors have asked that a Section 106 payment be made in full, they be notified in advance of that. The third issue, and I have to say, having looked at the viability reports attached to this report, I have extreme reservations about them. I mean, one of the most shocking factors is that the viability report that the planning committee looked at recommended basically waiving about 600,000 in Section 106, when the same organisation had produced a viability report in December 2020 recommending a Section 106 payment of 550,000. That's a big change in a short period of time. The issue that the developer raised in the press and the planning committee was that construction costs have gone up significantly. I've no doubt that's true, right? But I also have no doubt, I'm going to offer to donate £1,000 to the Lord Mayor's charity, and please minute this, if that developer goes to work in the next year, because the developer is not obliged to bring forward a scheme just because they've got planning permission. They don't need my advice to do this. I can bet you they're going to wait until construction costs have stabilised and house prices have done. So the financial calculations used in the viability report will not be relevant. And at the very least, we should look at whether there's a way of caveating Section 106 recommendations, so if the finances change of a development, it be varied. I think the other issue, and looking at the viability report, and I can't say this is the case, but I suspect it may be, that we don't vary significantly the number of firms we get viability reports from. Now, there've been foul accusations I've seen in social media about corruption, all that stuff. I don't believe for 1 minute there's any issue of corruption here. I think, though, there is a problem of the council not being robust enough in its approach to that, and frankly being quite needy. That we're desperate. We think we've got to promote at any price regeneration. Now, I've said before at this committee that I think the model of regeneration that focuses overwhelmingly on the property market is completely flawed, because that's only a tiny part of the local economy. But that has dominated regeneration policy, particularly in relation to city centres, for some decades. And I blame Michael Heseltine for that. You know, he committed that as well. It's true, actually. It's Heseltine's model of regeneration. And so I think we need to look at that, and I don't think we should be agreeing developments if they don't contribute to mitigating the costs around them, whether it be traffic, or this one's right by the waterfront. There's a lot we could do on the waterfront that the city needs. I mean, just looking at the coastal edge, the coastal beach, there's a lot of clean-up work to be done there. We could do with work along the Sefton Street corridor. You know, so much that could be done there, and it's irresponsible of us to agree to developments when they're not contributing more broadly. And it's not a gain. I mean, you'll know, like myself, the Baltic, which has become, in my view, seriously unstable, because all we've got is thousands of flats and very few in the way of broader amenities. So we have to build that in some way into the planning process. Finally, I'll finish on, if you can, I think we need regular reports on the Section 106 process to this committee. And I've raised before the separate issue, which I know, again, I think you agree with me, about the need to vary it to include social housing as a requirement. But it's really important, as I said, we do the right thing, but be seen to do the right thing. I mean, I'm not comfortable, and I don't think most people in the city are, that whatever the rationale of the planning committee's decision, that in a situation where we're looking to make major savings in our budget, we've not asked for hundreds of thousands in Section 106 money. And we can all say, and it's true, that that can only be devoted to certain things, but it's not a good look. And in politics and in public policy, it's as important sometimes as how things look as whatever's underlying it. So I'm sorry to go on at length, but I think these are really important issues. And it's important that we show the public and the people of this city that we're trying to address this problem.
Thanks, yes. Just as a fellow ward councillor, I'd like to echo those comments. Sarah?
No, I completely agree, Steve, and I think you pick up on the right points, which is against the backdrop of best value and against the backdrop of the budget and wanting to make sure that our city and residents have faith in us. It's something that we need to get right, and it's something that I feel really strongly about, as I know that a lot of people here would have picked up on. And I think I just wanted to say that I want to make sure that Section 106 is included right in the beginning of the planning process. And I know that the officers, I've spoken to them about that, and that they understand my desire for making sure that is at the heart and soul of our planning policies, of the local plan, and I hope of decisions going forward. And I think we know how important it is because we see how it affects our communities, and we see that when we don't have the money to deliver the things that communities need, such as in our ward with the lighting in the Grafton Street Park, the work of the open space programme that's being delivered now, and all those improvements across the city, that just shows you the importance of Section 106. And I think I also wanted to mention that there is currently a review of how Section 106 will be structured, and that will be under the local plan when it's adopted next year, and looking at how it will be a community infrastructure levy, which I hope that will bring more peace of mind to councillors and residents in knowing that it's not just an add-on, that it's a vital payment that the city needs. And I think it's also about how we positively shape our planning policy, so that when, you know, we're talking about, Steve, the type of developments in the city, the quality of development and the economic development, and how those sorts of developments fit into that. But I completely agree, and I wrote down all the recommendations that you think should happen. I might come back to you on the third one because I just missed the end of it, but I completely agree, and I'd be happy to take that forward and to request the information on viability reports being easily accessible, to look at the reports on Section 106. I know I recently worked with one of the planning officers to make sure Princes Park Ward, the councillors were concerned about where Section 106 had been spent, if it had been delivered, and we got a whole chart out to them about where it had gone and when, and the remaining balance. And I think I would welcome councillors to get in touch with me if they want that piece of work done for their ward, because it's something that councillors should really know what it's being spent on and where it is. So thanks, Steve.
Thank you. I think that would be appreciated. I know ward councillors used to receive a regular sort of 106 update, so that would be really good. Just one thing, I was actually going to ask about community infrastructure levy, and then you've mentioned it there. So is Liverpool City Council moving towards a community infrastructure levy, or are we in consideration of that?
I believe we're in consideration of it, but I'm going to pass it back to Sam, because I know one of the things that when I came into the cabinet position, we spoke a lot about Section 106. We spoke a lot about how the plans within, well, the policies within the local plan will change the way we look at planning and the processes of it. And I know that the team are working closely with me to make sure our values are in those policies. So I'll bring Sam into it.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Cabinet Member. Yeah, I fully agree with what Sarah's just outlined there in terms of the positive direction that we're travelling in terms of Section 106 particularly. We're working really closely with our Cabinet Member to secure the best policy framework we can for the city in terms of Section 106. And that will come following the adoption of the local plan. We've got a presentation shortly to talk you through the timelines on that. But in terms of the infrastructure levy, your direct question, absolutely, it's a scope. I've been tasked with scoping what is the best way to get developer contributions for the city. That may not just be infrastructure levy, it could be a cocktail of Section 106 and infrastructure levy, but we need to do that evidence base in order to support that direction. So we're currently scoping which way we're going to go with that. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd be very interested to hear how that goes and any updates on that. Community infrastructure levy is certainly something that I've been interested in for many years, and I think may address some of the problems we've got with 106. Sam, as well, just have you made a note of Councillor Mumby's comments about the changes to the new planning system, and also Councillor Robinson's point before that the planning lists are not being sent out to councillors at the minute? Yes, Chair, I've made a note of that. Thank you very much. Thanks. Are there any other questions for the Cabinet Member?
Sorry, Myrna.
It's not technically a question, it's more of my opinion. In my opinion, you know, if you're going to get it right, if Liverpool City Council is going to get this right regarding Section 106, then I think that it's going to have to be radical and it's going to have to be fast movement, because we've had millions and millions and millions of pounds since I was elected in 2016 that has not been recovered. For example, there was a project in the city centre that was allowed to do away with our underground parking on advice from planning, that $1 million of Section 106 would have to be paid to the council, but it was never actually recovered from this developer. In my own ward, there's probably £500,000 worth of Section 106 money that should have been collected from Redrow, and to this day, I cannot see where that money's been spent in my ward, £500,000. And I can bet you bottom dollar that a lot of that Section 106 money has not been collected. Now, as I say, there's been millions and millions of pounds where the residents of this city should have had a benefit to have to put up with schemes where their lives have been disruptive. But as an authority, I think that this has to be radical and this has to be moved forward rapidly, because, you know, we're running out of land, we're running out of opportunities, and this money it's not benefiting Liverpool City Council, it's not benefiting the residents. The developers are the ones who are on a win-win situation here. So this has to be moved forward quickly, I think. We can't wait. If the local plan gets delayed another year, then another year after that, another year, how many more millions are going to be just going down the plug hole? Because this authority can't get it right.
Thank you for that, Councillor Horace. I am going to bring in Councillor Mumby, but I'd just like to say you've said some numbers there and some accusations. I don't know if you've got any reports on that or their numbers, and I would want the planning officers and the officers to be able to come back on that and to give accurate information, probably on not now but in future, because I don't think it's fair to. We'll get the accurate figures for the next meeting for you, Myrna. Councillor Mumby.
Yes, sorry, just further to that. I mean, as an old lag, if I can take the risk of going into ancient history with the cabinet member, but the city's had a bad but improving record on Section 106 monies. I remember when me and Laura were in the cabinet together back about, I think it was about 2013-14 when I took over responsibility. At that point, about £20–25 million of Section 106 money was owing to the council because there were no mechanisms in place for collecting it, no officers responsible. That mainly related from the period before 2010, and I can't remember who was running the council then, but I don't think it was the Labour Party. But we started to put, and we recruited officers to start recruiting, to start collecting 106 and to start administering the scheme better. But I still think, as we discussed earlier, we haven't yet quite got it right to ensure that we maximise the contribution. So, you know, I think significant progress, but can do better is the situation. And, you know, politically, let's be frank about it, we've all not been good enough here. You know, the other thing that is important to point out, and it relates to a broader issue actually with Calla, which I don't think he quite grasped, is that I said earlier that the city was quite needy, had a bit of a needy attitude. Back in the 90s, that was pretty right, maybe in the early noughties. And in estimations of land values, it's important to recognise how dramatically they've begun to change. And you are in a bit of a race to stand still. This is a broader issue of Section 106. And we need to continually reset the clock to how we think about land values and how much we need regeneration or how desperate we are. And that is a challenge, not just for councillors, but for officers as well. And again, it's something that, thinking from this, I mean, maybe yourself, the Director of Regeneration, could report on that, because I mean, I know sites in our ward in the Dingle, you know, some of which have been the subject of controversy, which were drug dealing dog toilets, frankly, for years, and have now got houses built on them. And Callum actually kicked off about us disposing of them for nothing, you know, personally, I was really glad to see them built on, because they were a cost to us. But it may be at the point they were disposed of, they've moved from being a net debit to a net asset. And I think monitoring that stuff is quite, and I'm digressing a bit, but it does relate to the 106 issue more broadly, that having a feel for the changing market is a really tricky job, which none of us, I suspect, are on top of. I know I'm not, but I think it's just, again, we need to be humble but also alert here.
Thank you very much. Are there any other points on that report? No. Thank you to the Cabinet Member for that report. And if we now move on, noting that to the Director's report.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to start not by reporting on my report, if that's okay, but taking up one of Councillor Mumley's points about regeneration being a property game. I don't think it is. I think regeneration is a people game. And so I think if you see what we're trying to do in County Road, if you see the way we're trying to drive inclusion through our projects, if you see the way we're trying to work on retrofit and what it means for people, I think we'd really strongly agree that, you know, it's a mixed sport. It's not just on the ground. So, but thanks for the thought. Appreciate it. So an update on what we've been doing since the last time we saw you. Clearly, we've had this developers forum held at the ACC. We had 160 people turn out at the developers forum, which gives you a small idea of the amount of interest that people have in the city and what the city's priorities are becoming. So a successful event from our point of view, to be followed probably in January time by an event that will start to invite in a new set of investors, hopefully a long-term set of investors that will become our partners for building the city out in an inclusive way for the next, an inclusive and sustainable way for the next wave of our story. We continue to focus really strongly on applying scarce financial and personnel resources, prioritising what it is we're working on and how we're working on it, so that we maximise our impact. And I know that you've been invited in a couple of weeks' time to talk about the economic strategy, high value jobs, inclusion, net zero, and we'll go into details on that. I'm looking forward to the discussion. We've also, as you know, had budget proposals published. And actually this whole debate on 106 was really interesting to me, because part of the budget proposals for the Directorate are about more resource in the planning team, not just planners, but also policy, also building control. So having a really strong, stronger team working on that. And then also stabilising the investment and development team's budget, because it's been on an unstable footing for a couple of years now. The improvement plan, of course, continues, and I'll move on to the spending review. So, two sides for the spending review, really. On the one hand, we've had a strong take. We had £25 million for transport improvements as part of the City Region's bid, which will go towards St George's Gateway. £20 million, up to £20 million, of course, for the redesign of the National Museums Liverpool and Tate Liverpool, including the really sensitive re-establishment, I guess, of the Canning docks and a representation to the city of the Canning docks, including their difficult history. And we know it is a difficult history. And then £2 million for the development work of what we're calling the pool, which is the not quite Beatles led, but Beatles involved celebration of culture in the city. So a good take on the day, but no replacement for the fact that this is competitive bidding international programs, rather than money either devolved to the city region or devolved to or handed to the local authority to pursue its own priorities. and I'll leave you to comment on that. Good project progress. We said at the developers committee that we had 4 or 5 developers forum that we had 4 or 5 priority projects that we're going to bring out publicly, and we're on track with those projects. You can see some of the names there: Hemisphere, Littlewoods, Pall Mall, discussions ongoing, and I hope Councillor Gladden will be happy with progress being made on County Road, so Speller Library update. And as you kindly said, Councillor Mitchell at the start, update some progress, not enough for you, but still some progress on Stonebridge Cross, and we need to keep talking on that one. As the Cabinet member mentioned, we're also engaging more formally, more frequently, and with more desire with our registered providers, not just on the neighbourhoods agenda, but also on retrofit, also on stock condition, also on supporting us in planning and understanding the new local plan as it comes through. And that's beginning to be a robust and constructive dialogue that I'm pleased to report, and I'm sure the Cabinet member will report back to you on in more detail. So that's it. Overall, we're doing what we said we'd do in terms of improvement, in terms of prioritisation, in terms of progressing projects. I'm very happy to take questions.
Any questions or comments for the Director? Councillor Robinson, Councillor Thomas, then Councillor Mick.
Yeah, it's just a comment with regard to the extra resources for the planning team, and just to sort of say that whilst kind of planning might not be sexy or sometimes seen as frontline, it's absolutely necessary and vital. And the reason that I kind of say that is when I think about all the problems and challenges we have in Kensington and Fairfield, whether that's fly tipping and alley dumping, antisocial behaviour and noise, through some quite acute criminal stuff around kind of street drinking and begging, sex working and other kind of drug related issues. One of the common root causes, not the only root cause, but one of the common root causes is badly managed, poor quality, private rented properties. And the planning process has a huge role to play in robustly dealing with those things, whether it's frankly robustly knocking back bad quality applications that have the potential to cause all those problems, or actually more so the planning enforcement process, where kind of developers have gone and done something with a property that we don't know about, or even if they have got planning permission, actually aren't adhering to the conditions of the permission that they've got. So whilst this might not be kind of a glamorous extra resource, it's absolutely vital and necessary. So I strongly endorse what we're doing there, and kind of look forward to that coming forward, hopefully in the budget.
Absolutely, I'd just like to echo that as well, and I'm really pleased to see that some benchmarking's gone on with other core cities, because Liverpool for years I think has been really struggling with that, and I'm really pleased to see that balance has been redressed. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this was one of the reports I referred to under Matters Arising. I don't know what officers think the equality implications is, and I think that is something that we need to be looking at. It's to do with the public sector equality duty, and it is us as members who have to be sure that we know what the equality implications are on every decision and policy that is made. So, you know, it's up to members. We could say, well, unless we know these things, that we're not going to agree to this. Now, I don't think any of us actually want to do that. We'd just rather get it right. My interest, well, I'm interested in all the equality issues, but I have a particular interest as a disabled person in disability equality. And that is often not even acknowledged as an equality issue. Perhaps people think it's a welfare and care issue or something. So in particular housing, so in the report on page 34 there's housing progress. Now I need to know that it's specified all the time that disabled people's requirements are taken into account, because less than 9% of properties nationally have very basic access for disabled people. That is a level access at the door and a downstairs toilet, and most of those 9% are actually in London. So we don't know what the figures are here. We don't collect the data, and we get overlooked on housing and everything else really, unless it is specified and kept at the forefront of people's minds. And I know there's people here who say, "You've said this before, time and time again," and it keeps on happening. So unless it is specified, it does get overlooked. And I know that there are something, in other reports, it has been remembered. And the other thing that I wanted to hear about is the accessible housing register, because earlier this year there was some work done on improving that system, because it's not been working well at all, and people are waiting a long time to get accessible housing, what little accessible housing there is. So that is something that should be monitored through this process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Pertinent comments. I think there is good news in the local plan about accessible housing and our expectations of local housing, but I won't steal Sam's thunder or indeed James' thunder on that one.
Hi. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mark. Yeah, Councillor Thomas, you understand the policies within the local plan. I think you worked very closely with the team at the time to secure those policies. There are a number of other policies coming forward that we'll talk through with the local plan, but we are securing those, and we can explain the weight of those policies as we go forward.
Thank you. Is that Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah. Sorry, Peter.
Sorry, no, fine.
Are you still with me, Chair, or have you moved on to Peter?
I did say, is that okay?
Oh yeah. No, I was just going to say, well, are we getting a presentation on the local plan?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'll speak then. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. When I ask kind of a direct question, really interesting listening to the discussion and debate around Section 106 and funding and cost-based and how we do it. And there's a really helpful aid memoir around the changes within the paperwork. Does either the Director of Regen or the Cabinet member have an accurate-ish figure of how much currently sits in the Section 106 part? And the secondary question, the street scene who are tasked to delivering the whole agenda around 106, what is their total budget for the year?
If they're not big...
I'm actually not trying to be mischievous, Chair. I'm actually trying to understand. One of the tasks we have as a city, and I think Councillor Mummy made some interesting points about how can we be innovative, phrase used by Councillor Suarez as well, about agile. How can we be agile? And we have a figure, which is a big figure, which dwarfs the figure from the operational team that you have to deliver that. I know it dwarfs it, but I'm interested to see how much it dwarfs it. And looking at the aid memoir about the changes, because I know there are other local authorities that directly use Section 106 money to support some of the infrastructure work and officers on the ground. I can share those details with you. I know Councillor Mummy knows them, it's out there. Is there a way, and it might be a way of creating a voluntary part of the levy that can go to officer support? I'm aware of how little limited resources we now have across planning and on street scene. And is there a way of taking some of the money, just some of the money, to target it directly to pay for the officers' time, both the street scene but in planning, to actually deliver it? Because what has happened time and time again, we're caught up through not inertia, simple inability to have the people on the ground to deliver it. This is money that belongs to us, belongs to the people in the communities. How can we direct this better, and can we be innovative in doing it?
Yeah, thank you. Good questions. I can answer at one level of detail. I'm sure that Sam can answer at another level. So,
a straight answer to your question there is no, because we have a Section 106 policy that we work to out of the unitary development plan. So we only collect Section 106 money in lieu of open space within a development. It's capital. It's not revenue. The work we're going to be doing going forward on the local plan, the policy work, is where we're going to scope what we can as a council, what we consider as a body is appropriate for us to deal with developer contributions through the planning process, what monies we want to collect for what. So now is the opportunity, it's a perfect opportunity on the back of the local plan with the new policy framework coming forward for us to reassess and reset what we want to use Section 106 for. It might not just be money. There might be other things that we want to secure through a planning agreement attached to a planning permission of what we want for the best for Liverpool.
Councillor Mumby on this point.
I just indulging my inner cowboy, and officers may want to shield their ears here, but I mean, it's important to distinguish between risk and illegality, right? I can't recall when the City Council has ever been sued by a developer to request return of Section 106. I could be wrong, but I can't recall it happening. So there is perhaps a little bit of wiggle room there that we can think about. So I feel there's room for pushing out the boat. Of course, we don't want to start a precedent where they think, yeah, we can have a go at them over it. But generally, the other factor we have with the capacity to levy it and how we spend it is that most, though not all of them, are people who want to work with us in future. They're partners, you know, and again, we should be prepared to be robust and say, yes, you know, I've said it to people bluntly, yes, you can do that, but you really want me as an enemy? To be frank as that. I'm not saying officers can say that, but it's perfectly legitimate for politicians to say, you know, if you kick us, you don't expect any favours from us in future. I don't mean in any sense a corrupt way, but about how you forge a partnership. And partnerships are about flexibility and so on. And it is reasonable to ask people who are saying they're investing in the city to invest in the city and be a bit flexible about that. So I just feel we need to maximise the wiggle room that we have to be sensible. And I welcome the fact, I know you're looking at this time in terms of, you know, looking at how we can expand the scope of Section 106, but we should all remember the distinction between illegality and risk, something that's surely is brought home to us by the whole pandemic.
If just before the cabinet member comes back in, Chair, with respect, if I can say, look, I absolutely, and I knew you were going to say that, but I can show you examples in the city region where they do exactly that, and I'm not blaming them for doing it. I'm saying it happens now. I absolutely welcome and support your ideas around how we can be innovative, and I welcome that. That's great. That's brilliant. And we should be being more robust with developing and saying this is what we want to do. But we have a situation now, and I don't know if the director has the figures of how much sits in our pot, that we will be physically unable to deliver, not because we're unwilling or your department is unwilling, because we don't have the staff to be able to deliver the wider cities. And it's understanding what can we do now in the next financial year. We're going to be hit with discussions about the £30 million plus hole in the budget that we're going to discuss for the next financial year. How can we fill in a hole of money that sits within our account? It's in our bank. It's sitting there. Someone can tell me a figure. It's a big figure. So, you know, I know what was in last year's accounts, but how do we actually say, hang on a second, we've got to find £30+ million worth of, whether you want to use the word cuts or savings or rationales, whatever phrase you want to use. There's a pot of money there that is not being delivered. It is not officers' fault. It's not elected members' fault. It is around process. How can we tweak that process and challenge the process? I might not use, you quite use the words the Councillor Mumby used, but tweak the process. It's being done locally. Why can't we do it?
Thank you. And I'm sure I might be wrong. Would this be an area of work that the new sort of the new budget will be focused in terms of the policy work?
Yeah, well, we collect money at the moment, so that pot of money that the council is referring to has been collected for a specific purpose in accordance with that obligation. So we're obliged to spend it on that purpose to meet with the regs of which we're governed by. But going forward, we recognise that Section 106 benefits can be a number of things, but we need to secure them through policy if we're going to do that through the policy route.
I think that's another benefit. And I know, Councillor Mitchell, I'm not going to, because we've got to get on with other items. But yeah, I think that's another thing about the fact that there'll be an increase in budget for the planning team, which will also support policy-based work, because I think that's something that has been lacking, not due to lack of trying for the planning team, due to lack of capacity and resources. So it's good to see that that will be there going forwards as well. Councillor Doyle, did you want to come in on this before we move on?
No, I just wanted to say I think that's really interesting, and I think it's something that if the select committee agree, I'd like to take away and do a piece of work on and then come back, just so that members are informed about the situation. And just to update on some of the creative stuff we're looking at in terms of Section 106 agreements within planning and what that can lead to, is that one of the exciting things is we had a meeting with Preston Council whereby they're looking at improving employment conditions and employment outcomes for local people and local apprentices in terms of putting those Section 106 conditions in development. And I think that's some of the things that you're referring to, that we have to be creative in terms of the policy that we have that then goes on to limit or enable what we do with Section 106.
Thank you, that would be really appreciated. Thank you, Sarah. Can the Director's report be noted? Thank you. Now moving on to the local plan, Jane Haywood will be presenting, or is it Sam?
Chair, through you, could I introduce Jane, please, because it's the first time she's been to select. Jane has been working really hard on the local plan with the previous manager of the local plan team, Mike Eccles. Mike Eccles is retired, so now Jane has been formally appointed to his replacement. So she's leading on this really important piece of policy work. So that's hence why she's been invited this evening, so she can take you through it. She's a real asset to the team and working really hard on the plan.
Thanks, Sam, and thanks, Chair. So I've just got a very short presentation just to bring members up to date with where we're at in terms of taking the local plan forward to adoption. And now to try and, I think we've got, it's not working, is it? Let's try and start. Sorry, Anne, I don't know whether, can you start it from the beginning, from your laptop? That's the first one, yeah, I can talk to that. That's fine. If you just go to the first slide for me. Thank you. So this just shows where we've been and where we're going in terms of local plan. So we submitted back in May to government. We held some public hearings last October, and then we undertook some consultation over this summer on what's called main modifications to the local plan. Now, since undertaking that consultation, we've now received the inspector's report. So that's a key sort of step in the direction of getting this plan forward to adoption, really. And that's what I'll on the next slides I'll fill you in on what the inspectors said, but it's a positive move forward. We'll then be looking to come to full council on the 2nd of February with a recommendation. We'll be asking Cabinet to make a recommendation to full council to adopt the local plan, and then allowing for legal challenge. We'll be looking at full statutory weight of the local plan in March of next year. Go, thanks. So the inspector's report, which we're looking at publishing tomorrow, finds the local plan sound, subject to main modifications. That's normal that council submit a local plan and then the council suggests modifications to that plan for the inspector to consider in him making his decision as to whether the plan can be found sound. So we're now at a point where we can, as a council and council members, can determine whether to adopt the local plan. As I said, we'll be looking to bring forward a report on that to members. And then if adopted by members, it'll then replace the UDP. It'll be the statutory development plan for Liverpool, and it'll carry full weight in the decision-making process. So in terms of what the inspector has had to say to us, he's broadly supported our approach in the local plan. So it's about focusing development on brownfield land and delivering 1,739 homes per annum. So that's just short of 35,000 new homes over the lifespan of the plan. It's looking at land and protecting that for growth and for regeneration and job creation, and also focusing investment in our district and local centres. It's about protecting our open spaces, green wedges, open spaces and biodiversity assets. It's also about providing that sort of policy framework for future development at the Liverpool airport, but set within the context of requiring sort of high environmental criteria to be met. It sets a positive policy framework for development within the city centre. So we've got a key chapter now in the local plan on the city centre. And in terms of heritage assets, it also sets that positive framework for protecting the city's heritage assets. The World Heritage Site policy is still in the local plan because the inspector wanted us to proceed to adopting, but he also thought that the considerations relating to World Heritage Site were still valid and of relevance because of those heritage assets are still there on the ground and still require that level of protection. Thanks, Sam. So, if members, through Cabinet and through full council look to approve adoption of the local plan early next year, then it'll be a real sort of positive step forward in providing us with that up-to-date statutory planning policy framework. It'll provide greater certainty to communities and developers in respect of the policies and where development's going to occur. It'll give us that increased influence and ability to manage location and quality of development coming forward in the city. And it also ensure that we've got a number of significantly important policy approaches in place, some of which I think have already been mentioned in committee so far. So for HMOs, for affordable housing, in respect of tall buildings, also accessible homes, and in applying the national space standards. And importantly, it'll have that full statutory weight. So open up to questions. Just one final point. When we publish the inspector's report tomorrow, our assessment is that the policies within that would then carry very significant weight because the inspector is endorsing what's in that local plan going forward, and then it'll be with members to determine whether to go forward to adoption. Thank you.
Councillor Gladden.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that report. Just two very quick questions. One, round about what date will councillors receive the report itself for them to scrutinise it? And the second one is, when we look at the developments themselves within what we call the framework, what opportunity will we have and what time limit will we have to be able to put in our recommendations or changes to if we need to do so as local councillors?
Right.
Sorry, if I could just bring in Councillor Mumby on this.
Yes.
Yeah. Following Councillor Gladden's point, and just to sharpen it up, and it may make you want to sharpen axes and take me out and back and cut me to pieces. But is it possible to produce ward maps for councillors? I realise that's an awful lot of work. It's quite hard to decipher the whole city-wide local plan map, and whether we can change it or not. It is important that councillors understand what it is. But if it's not possible, it's not possible.
Just to come in on a couple of those points, we are in terms of bringing it forward for adoption. We'll be looking at some pre-scrutiny committees, so we'll be looking at bringing it to those ahead of bringing it to Cabinet. We'll then bring it to Cabinet with a recommendation, and it's Cabinet's role then to recommend to full council. We're at a late stage now. We're at the point where no further changes can be made to the local plan itself. But in terms of its usability, we are looking at getting it online in interactive digital format. So in terms of the policies map, you'll be able to go to the site or the area that you want to look at and look in closer detail. So it won't just be the citywide policies map. We'll have that interactive version operating as well when we adopt, which should hopefully make it easier to sort of zoom in on individual areas and wards.
Chair, can I just, through you, just confirm about that pre-scrutiny arrangement? I'm working with Mike Jones in committee services, and the proposal at the moment is to call a joint committee for all members to pre-scrutinise the plan before it goes to Cabinet. So they will be the relevant select committees that will pull together.
I understand that will be sometime in the new year, early new year.
Yeah. If it's not later this year, it'll be certainly, yeah, but before Cabinet.
Any other questions on that? Councillor Mitchell, and then
Point. So is that a pre-scrutiny committee of all the select committees or of some select committees? Sorry.
I understood it was going to be the relevant select committees. So, for example, it would be this committee, it would be finance, it would be the environmental committee, but I could be, committee services is still going through the details on that. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to say a big thank you to all the officers that have been involved in bringing this together for a long, long time. The date we were told was May 2018, it went to government, but there was a lot of work for several years before that in getting it to that point, and it's absolutely huge. I don't know how many people have actually looked at the local plan. It is absolutely huge, and obviously I'm really, really pleased about the accessible housing. That was the thing I was most involved with and hassled Samantha. I don't know if you can get a message to Mike, but I'd like to say a big thank you to Mike for the work that he did for a long time, and he was so helpful, and he really helped to push that through as well. Unfortunately, the home builders are not amenable to building accessible homes, which was, you know, one of the things I was talking about earlier on. They didn't want to do it at all. So I don't know whether we got through exactly what we wanted, and if not, you may be able to tell me that. And of course, this is separate to the housing that I'm talking about earlier, which is the housing within the council on social housing. Perhaps I could speak to you outside the meeting, Mark, if that's okay, just to explain what that was, because it was before you came. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gladden, you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible just to go back to that last slide, because before I ask the question I want to be sure what I'm asking is correct. Right. My colleague mentioned before about the number of problems that happen with probably Kensington County, for example, on the high streets, etc. At the moment, on licensing and planning, there are only 4 real aspects under law that people can appeal on, even councillors. So when it says if we go through the local plan, that gives a full statutory weight. Will we then have some of the conditions that we can no longer discuss or even apply when it comes to planning and licensing to new premises? Will whatever comes in the local plan be part of that? So in other words, the 4 conditions might go up to 5 or 6. So when we talk about full statutory rate, I'm asking, will that give the statutory rate that is increase what people can apply, can put in as a refusal for either planning or licensing?
Chair, would you like me to answer that? Yes, Councillor, it does. It's the same discussion that we had a couple of cycles ago, I think, about the relevant policies within the local plan, which are policy H10 and H11, which attempt to control the number of HMOs within particular areas that align with the Article 4 areas that we recently served before the summer. So yes, so they will have. We've been using them anyway in the decision-making process, and I'm going to take away Councillor Robinson's query as well about we should be applying those policies systematically and equally across the areas. So if they're not compliant, regardless of what the Picton work, then we should be refusing applications. So I'm going to take that back to the team as well. But yeah, it's going to have, well, as of when we publish the inspector's report, it'll have very significant weight, those policies, because the inspectors agreed with us with the modifications that they're suitable to be made and make in the decision-making process. So it captures 3 and above in those areas that are identified within the Article 4 area.
Thank you very much. Are there any other points on this? I'd just like to place Mark's up.
Yeah, thank you. This is actually turning out to be, it's quite a challenging plan, this. It's quite a challenging, whether it's on tall buildings or accessibility requirements or affordable housing. There are some high quality hurdles that this plan establishes that I think we're all looking forward to working with. But one of the things that we do want to do is make sure that we land it properly with the development community, that we land it properly with prospective investors. So just like Sam, to say a few words about how we're engaging with those communities to get it landed correctly.
Thank you, Mark, Chair. Yeah, this is a fundamental shift in how we've dealt with planning in the city. It's a brand new plan, albeit submitted 3 years ago, with really strong policies that we want to shape the place that we want for Liverpool. And what we've done in order to commence that dialogue with the development industry is I've written to about 300 stakeholders that we engage with, developers, agents, planning agents, to say, this is coming, these are the changes, and this is the quality we want from you. So I've offered a dialogue. I'm going to be contacting them again and setting up topics that we think as a council are really important to engage with with developers, particularly because they're the people that are coming forward with the schemes that are going to shape our environment. So I am really keen to have that early engagement with those stakeholders in our environment, so we as a council are sure that we're getting the best possible delivery out of those stakeholders and those partners that we're dealing with.
Thank you for that. That's really good to know. Councillor Juarez.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question, it's more of a comment, really. It's with regards to affordable housing. You know, we do have a need for affordable housing all across the city. So I want to see this affordable housing to be right across the board in all of the wards of all the city. For example, the ward that I represent is Liverpool 25, and there's been no affordable housing being built, I would say, in the last 8 years. The houses that are being built are for the high income, high earning families. And a lot of people where I live want to stay close to their relatives. They want to see the children being able to afford a house that they can actually get a mortgage for. At the moment, they can't, because, as I say, those houses are 550,000 upwards, up to 1 million, and those are the only kind of houses that we've had being built in recent years. So when we talk about affordable housing, I would like affordable housing in South Liverpool, not just in the north of Liverpool. So we've got to get over this north divide. Affordable housing has to be right across the board on the city. That's not a question, it's just a comment.
Thank you, Mona. I'm sure you've fed that in over the years that we've had the local plan consultations. Just one thing I just wanted to place on record, thanks to Jane and the team and to Mike previously for the work, because this has been years in the making. This has been something that we have discussed at this committee and its predecessor many times and have fed into work over many years. So it's really good to see it, and it's really good to be in grasp of it having statutory weight. I'm interested as well in terms of the maps and when that will be made public. I know Councillor Mumpy's alluded to it. At the minute, we've been working off draft maps that are very large and unwieldy, but it's something online that we could just go to would be really good to see as well. But thank you for all your work, and thank you for this report. So thank you,
Chair. Thank you.
Can that be noted? Fab, thank you. And now we go to city plan. Is that marked? Let me just double.
The shot on the director's face suggests that he wasn't expecting that.
So it's on the supplementary agenda, and it's at pages 48 to 58. Mark's name is down on it.
It's Claire.
Thank you, everybody, and good evening. Sorry for the interference. I'm going to talk to you this evening about the city plan, the aims and the priority projects, and how we are aiming to meet our city plan objectives with the implementation of some of our priority projects across the city. This report is not set out as a summary update on the projects and their progress, but if any information is required in relation to a particular project, I'm happy to take questions or come back to you with responses on those points. But the purpose of this report is to consider how we are delivering the city plan across our main priority areas. You will have had the opportunity, I hope, to have a look at the report. But in summary, the report talks about 12 of our projects. So it's not an exhaustive list of all the work that we're currently undertaking at all. Within that list, there are 4 priority housing projects, being Denford Road, Festival Gardens, Stonebridge Cross, but also linking clearly to housing is Stored Sites project, because as we know, the stored sites are like stored housing. In relation to the commercial projects, we cover a range under the city plan, and in terms of promoting social value, equalities, social, environmental and economic impacts, all of the projects are assessed against these parameters as well. However, the purpose of this report is to look at the city plan aims, to assess the project in relation to what it's delivering against those aims, and to summarise this for Select Committee this evening. So just as a very brief reminder, the city plan is thriving, sustainable and fair city for everybody, with 6 main aims sitting underpinning it. Healthier, happier, fairer city, people who are educated to succeed, our safe and thriving neighbourhoods, strong, inclusive economy, low carbon, connected and accessible city, and the most exciting city in the UK. Of note is the recent delivery of the depot, which was 2 20,000 square feet sound stages located on Edge Lane, adjacent to the Littlewoods building. That's a strong economic recovery project, which also links into our neighbourhood and education with training, and also supporting the Littlewoods project, which is moving forward to the next Cabinet report in December. You'll have heard the Director this evening mention that we need to maximise our economic impact, we need to prioritise our time and resources, and the snapshot summary of the projects within this report talks about where we are hoping to maximise city plan aims and objectives across the city. As I mentioned earlier, this isn't a summary project update report, but it's to give you a summary of the areas that we intend to move forward with in the future. There are a number of projects that are not included on this list, but it wasn't possible to summarise everything that we're working on at the moment. And the neighbourhoods report that's coming up as part of the agenda this evening will home in on Picton, Anfield and County. So this report only mentions the Anfield project in relation to neighbourhood and a strong, thriving economy. Very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members of the committee have any? Councillor Mumby?
Forgive me for being grossly unfair. I'm afraid I'm one of these dinosaurs. Whenever I hear the word plan, or particularly master planning, I want to scream. I'm never really sure how they help us think intelligently. And I am, to be completely wicked, particularly amused by an item on page 55, 2.16.1, safe and thriving neighbourhoods. The future development of residential units will contribute to the delivery of new homes as part of a wider mix of uses within King's Dock, which is quite entertaining given an earlier conversation. But a more substantial point I want to make, and again it's unfair in terms of regen, because it doesn't really come under you, but one of the biggest problems associated with austerity is the way it's impacted on what I'd call frontline staff or neighbourhood staff across the piece. We've absolutely did a lot of work on that. So we've been stripped out there, and that's true not just with us, but for example, the problems with GPs in the health service, the problems with frontline neighbourhood policing, all those areas, and that that undermines our capacity to create viable neighbourhoods. So you're delivering good schemes, and I appreciate and respect that work, but unless there's the kind of people infrastructure to support that, it's very difficult to make them sustainable. One of the things, and I may be really alluding to a previous item, but I think one of the things that's disturbed me most as a ward councillor in recent years is the way that registered providers have pulled back from any neighbourhood role. They may be bringing forward housing schemes, but they don't talk to us. I mean, if I'm dealing with tourists now, I have to go to Liverpool councillors' inquiries, etc., which is not a good look, frankly, from their point of view. So I think one of the things that piece of work that needs to go alongside this is when we're talking to partners about developments, is how are they, as well as ourselves, going to invest in a neighbourhood capacity, which shouldn't be limited to one organisation, you know, but because all the services are crumbling. You know, I know in the City Council how everything is crumbling, and you can't do regeneration without people to regenerate a neighbourhood, and everybody's on the brink. And I'm really not having a go here. I'm posing a problem which I don't know what to do about. I doubt if you do either, but we need to acknowledge and recognise as a kind of flip side of regeneration and a problem that we can't hide away from.
Yeah, thank you. If I could just come back on that, thank you for your comments. I really appreciate the points that you've just made. That is the challenge. The purpose of the city plan is to harness collaboration between the public and the private sector. And I see our role across all of these projects about it's resetting the relationship with our partners, and it's got to be about true public and private sector collaboration, because we don't have the ability, with the impact on our services and the budget cuts, to deliver everything that we would ideally like to deliver with purpose. So we are relying on re-gearing and resetting those relationships, particularly with the RPs, and we're on with that at the moment. And I know the council is looking at a new management structure in terms of a neighbourhood team, because while we're undertaking a number of projects across Anfield, County and other ward areas, we'd like to roll out neighbourhood regeneration across all of our wards, not just a few. The resources are a real challenge. Bringing in funding is a real challenge. We have to hustle for money with the CA and other government grants, and we're very, very prepared to do that. But what we also expect our partners to do is to work with us on the challenges that we face. And the city plan is about delivering something cohesively and a blueprint for the city in terms of neighbourhood regeneration. And I'm excited about a neighbourhood directorate within the council to start to really spearhead that transition into neighbourhood reform and building our communities back up. But I absolutely want our RPs to work with us as well, and we are resetting that relationship with them to move forwards in the future.
Thank you very much. Councillor, quickly.
Just a supplementary kind of something that Councillor Doyle will know. We had a meeting in our ward a few months ago, really looking at how we can support particularly the most vulnerable sections of the communities. But one of the things we agreed to do was to write to the major private sector partners in the ward, asking them to contribute to a neighbourhood fund. And I wonder if it's worth thinking about citywide as part of the conversations you're having with partners, perhaps ask them to contribute to a separate mayor's fund that could be used to match other funds, both centrally and at ward level. It's just a very practical thing that they can do, and it doesn't need to be a lot. I mean, again, they used to do that. I mean, I remember going back a few years, some of the housing associations used to match our youth service budgets. That's all stopped. But as part of that conversation, it might be worth, I mean, even if it was, you know, 5,000 per housing association in each ward that they operate in, that's peanuts, but it's not peanuts in terms of the impact on the ward. And then some of the private developers, it's goodwill money for them, but it would have a big impact on what we can deliver. And again, it's us fulfilling a role, not so much a service provider, but as kind of, you know, the spider at the centre of the web, the coordinator.
Thank you. I think, Councillor Doyle, do you already meet with the RPs on a regular basis if there's something you could take forwards?
Yeah, so I meet with the chair and the deputy chair of the Registered Providers Chief Exec Group. But I think one of the things that we saw from that is that it didn't feel as formal as it needed to be. And I think that's why we're moving towards implementing a partnership board where myself and the officers sit down. I think currently it will be with the major RPs, and we have meetings and we talk about what we need from them and what they need from us so that things become more streamlined. And I completely agree that we need to capitalise on the fact that we're in a city where we need a lot of help delivering the things that our communities need, and also the fact that we are a city where there is a sense of solidarity and helping each other. And I think that's something that with the city plan and with those partnerships that we should really capitalise on.
Thank you very much. Just one thing that I sort of had in my mind when I was reading through the report is how closely the team is working together and how siloed each project is. For example, the Festival Gardens project and the King's Dock project, they're about 2 miles apart on the waterfront, and they're both down as future leisure projects. So I'm just wondering how closely those are together. You know, the same leisure activities aren't being sought after for two different schemes, are they? And that's also being integrated, not just across these schemes, but across all of these sort of wider projects.
Thank you. Yeah, Festival Gardens is at the moment predominantly residential-led future development, and King's Dock is coming forward as well. When we are considering opportunities in relation to each site, we're considering each site and each location on its own merits. The Festival Gardens is obviously a waterfront location like King's Dock is, but there are very different aspirations in relation to King's Dock and Festival Gardens, predominantly because Festival Gardens will deliver 1,500 new homes, and it will start to integrate communities in South Liverpool, and we have to give credence to that. We will look at King's Dock in a different and unique way.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments or questions for this? Can that report be noted? Thank you very much. Moving next on to neighbourhood plans. I'm sorry, Councillor Bumby, it's an evening of plans. You deliver this. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm covering this one. I'm Mike Horrocks, Divisional Manager in the development team. And you'll be pleased to know that I probably skipped straight from plans to projects, if that helps. I'm not going to go through the entire report in detail, really. It's a short update. It's really about 3 key neighbourhood sort of projects and areas in which the council development team are playing a lead role and working hard to make things happen. So I'm very happy to take questions at the end of this as well, obviously. The first area really under the kind of the New Generation Neighbourhoods programme is very much in response to the impacts of the pandemic, but that focuses on longer term issues as well, and that's in Picton. And the team are bringing forward a kind of longer term plan for dealing with housing issues in the neighbourhood, but I think from the conversations and the comments made this evening, it is very important to focus on those housing issues. We're working quite closely with registered housing providers. We met last week and had a really good conversation with them about them taking a more of a lead role. In Anfield, the team had developed and arranged secure funding made quite a lot of progress with funding for a significant programme of projects that will complete public realm works, will invest in the high street and bring new shops and services for the community in the area. And in County District, the team have made really good progress, despite the pandemic, in delivering a range of projects from from an ambitious vision at one end for the area through to business grants, a planned hub for enterprise employability, learning and a kind of one-stop shop style services, and enhanced neighbourhood policing kind of at the other end, which has helped to reduce crime in the area and certainly contributed towards reducing fear of crime as well. So, I mean, noting a number of the comments from members this evening, you know, there are significant housing issues in our neighbourhoods, and at the same time, significant resource pressures. Definitely sort of, you know, working with a wide range of different organisations is very high on the agenda. You can't develop neighbourhoods without it. And I think the lack of resource in many senses means we do need to plan together, because what we need to do is make sure that we use our resources to best effect. And a key part of that is the resources that are within communities themselves. It's really important for us to continue to build the strength of community-based assets and organisations, so that we've got people to work with on the ground.
Thank you very much. If any members got any questions or comments on this? I think we'll take that as a good sign. Lots of plans, but I'm sure members, it is interesting to see, and I think it will be interesting to see how the Picton pilot progresses and how that is expanded across the rest of the city, because I'm not because whilst Picton is a good area to try this in, I'm not sure how representative it is as an area in terms of the majority of the wards across the city, so that would be good. Councillor Mumby?
Here, get off that easily. No, I mean, I think the one area I can understand, though reluctantly, accept master planning is if it's useful for a funding bid. Apart from that, anybody who knows Picton, I mean, if we're going to do a master plan there where you ask residents what they want, they'll be throwing rubbish at you, because anybody who knows Picton knows what needs to be done. You don't need a master plan there, you need to clean it up, because it's the filthiest ward in the city and it has been for decades, you know, and you just need, you know, those key performance management tools, ears and eyes, you know, to see that. So I wonder what the 70,000 is going to be spent on. Is it to support a bid for funding, in which case, you know, although I squirm, I get it. But if it's to just do a consultation with residents, I think you'll provoke mayhem. You know, they won't thank you for being asked what they want us to do, because they've told people loud and clear there over years. It just hasn't happened.
Thank you for asking the question, because it gives me the opportunity to say it's definitely not about more consultation. That's very much about engaging some expertise that will help us to work and lever in some more money, we hope, from registered providers as well, to I think get us to a position where they already have plenty of skin in the game, but to get them to a position where they've got more skin in the game and more of a leadership role, and feel that we're going to work with them and enable them to do that as a council, to plan out how spaces and places in that neighbourhood should be better used, principally in order to try to reduce the pressure on public services and residents in that neighbourhood. So it's about potentially you know, reducing the levels of, you know, overpopulation in the neighbourhood that are creating the pressures and the issues, which is about tidying the space up for sure. But it's not about going out tidying up and then going out the next week and tidying up and going out and do it the following week. It's about trying to turn the tap off rather than just, you know, keep collecting the water in a bowl.
Thank you very much. Mark?
Yeah, thanks. I agree with that. Councillor Mummy, I'm going to go out on a limb here, because you've probably seen neighbourhood initiatives with lots and lots of council money behind them, because they've been them in the recent past, and you probably thought they're effective, and we might agree with you. But we keep coming back to this theme in this committee that the regeneration game has changed, and not necessarily for the better. So when you think about what money you can get into neighbourhoods, you can put more council money in, but you're only taking it from somewhere else. The RPs are relatively well funded. Arts Council and Heritage Lottery and etc. have little bits. CCGs have some. And so the challenge for us, and Michael alludes to it, is to spend the £70,000 figuring out who else has money and what they might be interested in doing. And I know that's a less satisfactory answer than the answers you maybe got 5 or 10 or 15 years ago, but it's the best answer that we can give, given the resource pots and flows that we see. You with me?
I've just to come back actually to something you said. Actually, I think the best way to spend money in neighbourhoods like that is to pick up the rubbish every week, and the next week, and the next week, and the next week, and the next week. That's more important than anything else. It's how we actually cleaned up our ward, frankly, in the Dingle. Every time the rubbish was dumped, it was picked up. Every time the rubbish, I mean, things like alligates can help, and other stuff and that, and changing the demography, but actually really, really simple things. And I said, if you're doing it to get more money in, but again, we've had HMRI in there, you know, over years. The homes for £1, which I think has been pretty good, but it's very much work in progress, you know. So if you can get money off the housing associations, but I can see actually a whole infrastructure of officers writing stuff and not doing stuff there with the best intentions in the world, but actually not impacting on residents' life on the ground, and that worries me.
I'm sure that's the thought that the officers will take away.
I don't think that worries you as much as it worries us. That's not what we come to work for or try and achieve, right? But we do have to be very sanguine about the funding streams that are available and maximise their impact, and I'd like to assure you that that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Councillor Pitchers?
I appreciate what Councillor Mumby said about cleaning up the area, and I think it definitely needs to be cleaned up. You know, anyone who's been to Picton can see that, but I think that we need to be looking at the wider picture as well, and I don't know how, but somehow creating a sense of community pride and getting the community involved and getting the community on board, so that we don't have to keep sending in people to clean it up and then it gets all messed up again for eternity. I think that registered providers is the way to go, because it does seem like they have the most pots of money available. I absolutely agree with that. And as someone who's previously worked in the arts, there's not much money from the Arts Council. There's not that much money from CCGs anymore. So yes, I agree with what Mark has said as well. I think we need to be more creative in finding different pots of funding, but also I think we need that community engagement that's so important.
Thank you very much. Can members note that report? Thank you very much. Now we have a motion. The motion was referred from full council. It's unlocking the potential of local high streets, and it was submitted by Councillors Nick Small and Claire McIntyre. Councillor Nick Small is here to speak to it and move.
Yeah, just very briefly, Chair, because I realised the time and people starting to put the coats on and things. This is this. I'm not letting her out anyway. This is a motion that was at the last full council. And both Claire and I are Labour and Cooperative councillors. This is a co-op party campaign unlocking the potential of local high streets, and I think it's something that this council should fully get behind, because I think it's very pertinent to some of the issues that we've been talking about tonight. High streets, I think, are facing an existential threat across the country. You've got new technologies, e-commerce, affecting the business model of traditional high street retailers, but a lot of that's been heightened by COVID-19 and how people have responded to that. In 2020, 17,500 retail outlets across the country ceased to exist. That's 50 retailers a day on high streets up and down the country, including in Liverpool. There's a fundamental issue with business rates, and I think business rates need to be radically looked at. I think that is Labour Party policy, and it's something that this motion calls upon. That's an issue for retailers, because I think retailers with traditional high street retailers with a lot of the value tied up in premises on high streets, I think are facing huge amounts of business rates. Their competitors online have the value in intellectual property, a lot of it offshore, and they're not paying the same. They've not got the same premises there. They're not paying the same business rates. They're not paying the same levels of corporation tax, and I think that really needs to be looked at. There is a community issue with that, because the business rates regime is causing a lot of high street businesses, contributing to high street business failure. But it's also an issue for local authorities. In the last 11 years, we've seen local authorities like Liverpool become increasingly dependent, with the revenue support grant dwindling away, increasingly dependent on the growth of business rates. That affects what we do in terms of regeneration and what drives our priorities with regeneration. But up and down this city, we're seeing retailers on high streets, which form the backbone of our business rate base, dwindling away, and that's going to have huge challenges for frontline public services increasingly, unless we change the way that we look at business rates and the way that we tax business premises, and we tax in, we have local taxation. So I hope this motion can be approved tonight formally, so that as a city we can get behind the unlocking the potential of high streets as council policy. It builds on a lot of the work that we're already doing. The County Road District, I was there, been there quite a bit over the last few weeks with the by-election, and I think that place has you're seeing the transformation of that of County Road and how businesses are coming together, and it's a real success story. And I think to a large extent that's because of the role the City Council has in terms of placemaking and what we've done on that. So what this campaign calls for, just to summarise, is three things. First of all, for a lot of the new government pots, Levelling Up Fund, the Towns Fund, the Shared Prosperity Fund, to be properly devolved down to cities and city regions. At the moment, we're not seeing that. We're not seeing local authorities, we're not seeing city regions being in the driving seat of that new funding that's coming into cities. Secondly, it asks for the City Council to map out ownership of the high street in Liverpool, to look at business premises, who owns them, what can we do to step in. And thirdly, I think building on some of the work, the joint agency work that we're doing in places like County Road, is to look at targeting empty premises that are blighting many of our high streets, and using things like the antisocial behaviour legislation to start to tackle those, to start to tackle that blight, turn those communities round, put pride back into those communities. So very much hope that we can support this, and we can play a role as a City Council with other local authorities in pushing this agenda forward.
Thank you very much, and that was very comprehensive. Councillor Small. Councillor Hurley.
Yeah, thanks. I support the motion. I want to speak to a related topic, which is ownership of retail units on the high street. About a year ago, myself and my ward colleagues helped our local social enterprise, a food co-op, to start up in Mossley Hill ward. And we've got about 200 odd members now. And every week they go down and they can fill up a basket of goods for next to nothing. It's a not-for-profit, but it's not really a not-for-profit, because they're giving 700 quid every month to the landlord, who makes a fair profit out of that. If they didn't have to give 700 quid every month to the landlord, they could open another branch, and another, and another. And they could actually pay the staff instead of relying on voluntary labour. The landlords themselves, they don't really care, because the shops themselves, they kind of bundle up different shops in different towns, and they just get sold on into big financial products, where as long as there's a percentage return, it doesn't really matter whether there's community involvement on the high street or whether the shutters down on retail shops. But it matters to our residents, because you can walk down any district centre, any high street in the city, and you can see shop after shop with shutters down, or windows put through, or buddleia growing out the roof, or whatever it is. And I don't know what the solution is, but I do know that the council, in whatever form, has a role to play. Whether you can use your good officers to persuade landlords to try a different business model, and although they might get a 54% return on their portfolio across the whole country, maybe a 56% return would be better. Maybe they can come down and say, you grew up in Liverpool, and look at the state of County Road, or look at the state of what you're doing here, because you're only looking at numbers on a spreadsheet rather than communities. So I'm really positive about the motion in general, but also specifically point 7, where it says continue to contact landlords of vacant premises and work with the Chambers of Commerce and landlord associations on the bid. Because I think that's key. Because not only is it business rates that's killing the high streets, it's the landlords that are stinging our small shopkeepers, small retail units for everything that they're worth. And sooner or later, we're going to find out that it's not just the not-for-profit who's paying 700 quid a month to the landlords that goes bust. It's every other shop down the high street that goes bust as well, because the landlords don't care, and it's our communities that are going to be feeling the pinch in the end. So, support the motion.
Thank you. Cabinet Member.
No, I just wanted to say I think it's a fantastic motion, and I'd like to invite Nick and Claire if they wanted to have a meeting to talk about what we do moving forward. And in terms of Patrick's point, I do think we as a council have a role to play, and I think it's about understanding that role. And I'm really keen to make sure that our SMEs and that our social businesses are supported. And I think it is about coordination and bringing them on board with the city plan aims that Claire mentioned.
Thank you very much. Can I have a show of hands from members as to who supports this motion? Unanimous. Thank you, that's passed. Thank you, Councillor Small. If you could let Councillor McIntyre know as well. Next on our agenda is the scheme of delegation. So it is found at the back of the agenda on pages, apologies, 43 to 47, 3 items on it. Have any members got any questions? No. Can we note that scheme? And I'd just like to place my thanks for this report. It's thoroughly comprehensive. I think it's the best scheme of delegation report that I've seen that's come to not just this committee but other committees as well. So thank you to whoever prepared it. Thank you very much. Next, submitted questions. We've had no questions submitted for this meeting. In terms of the next meeting, submit to Anne Coy in advance, and schedule of dates. We'll actually next be meeting in the 13th of January, so next year. This was actually our last meeting before Christmas, so I'm sorry I didn't bring mince pies, but it did feel a little bit early. And that meeting will be solely on housing issues. Thank you very much, and I hope you all have a lovely night.